kommt das eigentlich in der Bibel her? Wo kommt das vor in der Bibel, dass Sex exklusiv für die Ehe gedacht ist? Immerhin gibt es ja zu vielen anderen Sachen sehr direkte Aussagen, also zum Beispiel zum Thema Ehebruch gibt es ein sehr, sehr klares Gebot in den 10 Geboten. Beim Thema Sexualität ist es ja oft nicht so klar, und da hören wir jetzt mal rein in die Antwort von Sam Allberry.
Yeah, it's a really important question, because if God doesn't say it, we don't need to be burdening ourselves with it. And the Bible does say it explicitly and repeatedly. So we see it both in terms of the positive vision of sexuality that is given to us in Genesis 2, that unique, exclusive, one flesh union of Adam and Eve that is permanent. We then see it, that good vision reflected in the various things that are prohibited. So things that fall outside of that pattern are then prohibited throughout the rest of the Old Testament, and that includes sex outside of marriage. It includes adultery, as you said. It includes having more than one spouse. Some of those negatives are given to us through direct commandment. Some of those negatives are actually given to us through narrative. So we see examples of polygamy in the Bible, and they do not commend polygamy. That is a prohibition that is given to us in narrative form. But when it comes to Jesus himself, he didn't speak about sexual ethics often, but the times when he did, he had some very, very significant things to say, which reinforce and actually intensify the commands that were already given in the Old Testament. So I mentioned in another part of our discussion, Matthew 5:27 and 28, Jesus takes the Old Testament command against adultery, and he says, you've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, so, okay, what's he going to do? What's he going to change? He doesn't change the scope of the commandment in terms of lessening it or lightening it or overturning it. He intensifies it. He says that looking lustfully is actually breaking the heart of the commandment. The commandment was never merely about upholding your marital vows, although that is very significant. It was about something far deeper than that. It's about how you regard other people, and whether you turn other people's sexuality into something of a commodity that exists for you to consume, for you to be satisfied by. And so Jesus is giving a word there to us that is basically saying, all of us turn sexuality into a form of lust and covetousness and commodifying other people made in God's image. So he actually kind of takes that command and says it goes far, far, far deeper than people had assumed it was. It's not merely about external behavior for people who are married. It's about the posture of our heart, whoever we are, towards other people, and how we regard their sexuality, and whether we uphold their dignity, their sexual dignity. And by the same token, Jesus is saying he's bothered about how other people might look at us, how other people might think about our sexuality. In Matthew 15 and parallel accounts in other passages, Jesus references sex outside of marriage. He talks about how, again, it's our hearts that are the issue, that what comes out of our heart is what makes us unclean in God's sight, and gives various examples of stuff that comes out of our heart. And one of those things he lists is, he uses the Greek word porneia. We often translate it in the Bible as sexual immorality, because porneia was a kind of catch-all term for any sexual behavior outside of marriage. That's what the word meant. It was the bucket you put all kinds of non-marital sexual intimacy into. So again, Jesus is reaffirming there that teaching of the Old Testament. And again, in Matthew 19, he talks about marriage, reaffirms that Genesis 2 template, quotes it, talks about a man leaving his father and mother and being united to his wife, and the two becoming one flesh, and what God has joined together, let no one separate. In other words, that one flesh union is meant to be between a man and a woman within marriage, and it's not meant to be undone. So it's not meant to be something where we have multiple sexual partners. It's not even meant to be the thing where we go from one exclusive relationship into another one, into another one, into another one. It's meant to be something that is lifelong and exclusive between a man and a woman. Jesus is not neutral on these things. He's not he doesn't just sort of sit this one out, nor does he take those Old Testament sexual ethics and say, well, that was then, this is now. He does that with other types of Old Testament command. He shows us that the food laws no longer apply. He declares all foods clean. We're told that in places like Mark chapter 7. He tells us that everything, all those laws that were bound up with the temple, those had their time because he has come to be the true temple. But interestingly, those sexual ethics he reiterates and even intensifies. He doesn't abrogate them. He doesn't park them. He doesn't say, well, let's keep them because those are kind of interesting points of, you know, historical significance. He says, no, these are still in play. And in fact, they go far deeper than people had typically assumed.
Wir hoffen, diese Antwort hat dir weitergeholfen. Hinterlass uns doch deine Gedanken dazu in den Kommentaren. Wenn du das vollständige Video ansehen möchtest, findest du den Link in der Beschreibungsbox.
Wenn dir dieses Video gefallen hat, dann like dieses Video doch und abonniere diesen Kanal, damit auch andere diese Inhalte finden können.
Schick uns gerne auch deine persönlichen Fragen per Instagram. Wir freuen uns, mit dir ins Gespräch zu kommen.
Profundum ist Teil von Campus für Christus, ein spendenfinanziertes Projekt, das sich mit dem christlichen Glauben und seiner Tiefe, Höhe und Weite auseinandersetzt. Wenn du Videos wie diese und die Arbeit von Profundum möglich machen möchtest, dann findest du unten in der Beschreibungsbox die Details dazu.
Bis zum nächsten Mal.